Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Software Usage Analytics Accelerates Revenue Growth. I'm your host, Louise Stebbings, and I'm Marketing Manager here at Flexera. And before I introduce our speakers, I just want to do a bit of housekeeping with you. So I'm sending you out a little thumbs up, thumbs down signal now. You'll see that popping up on your screen. If you can just press the green thumbs up just to let me know, can you see the slides? Can you hear me? That would be great. I just want to check that you can see and hear us. And while you're doing that, I'll just tell you a little bit about the setup today. So there's the boxes on the screen are all movable and resizable, so you can see the presentation. There'll be some questions at the end. So if you have any questions as we're going through the webinar, just type them into the chat box that you can see, and we'll get through as many of those as we can at the end. If we don't answer your question, we will answer them after the webinar. So please don't worry if we don't answer your question. Some networks can cause the slides to advance a little bit slowly. We recommend logging off your VPN. And if you notice the slides are a bit behind the voiceover, press F5 on your keyboard and that will refresh the screen, and you should catch up then. And then finally, if you have any other sort of technical issues, you'll see a little sort of widget with some symbols on your screen, one of which will be a question mark symbol. That's the help tool. If you just click on that, there'll be some tips and hints there about how to make your viewing experience better. You will get a copy of this recording within 24 to 48 hours of this webinar. So if there's any bits you missed, don't worry, we'll be sending you a recording out. Okay, so I shall introduce our speakers. Our speakers today are Mark Thomason, Research Director, Digital Business Models and Monetization Practice at IDC. We also have Nicole Segerer, who's VP of Marketing and Enablement at Flexera. And we have Victor DeMarines, VP of Usage Analytics Products at Flexera. Now, Flexera acquired Revulytics earlier this month, and we're really excited about this. And so our speakers today are really looking forward to sharing their expertise with you about how software usage analytics can be used to achieve revenue growth. So with that, I will hand over to Nicole. Nicole, over to you.
Thank you so much, Louise, and thanks everyone for joining us here today. So just a quick introduction before we hand things over to Mark Thomason from IDC. So here's what we will talk about today, right? With the acquisition of Revulytics, obviously Flexera has broadened our monetization portfolio. And we did that because usage analytics is and should be part of any monetization strategy today, right? So when you're a software supplier, you think about how you want to monetize, you definitely need to understand how your products are being used. So usage analytics from our perspective is a really important and strategic component to monetization moving forward. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what exactly you can learn about the usage of your products and what insights that you can get. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from Vic about that. And then obviously, it's always important to talk about outcomes. So we'll talk about how the right data really enables your teams to make the right decisions, right? And usage data is important for product teams. It's important for pricing and licensing decisions. It informs compliance initiatives. And obviously, in the end, it always helps with customer growth and renewals. So this is something that we will talk about as well. If, as Louise mentioned, we also want to get all your questions answered. It's going to be an interactive session today. If you have anything that you would like us to address, please post your questions in the Q&A and we will make sure to answer it. So as we get started, let's start on the high level. If you're working in a product team and you're working for a software company, your biggest goal is probably to drive more revenue from software, right? The goal is always to grow the top line, but at the same time, you want to protect your IP and make sure that only paying customers get access to software and only those who are, actual customers get to use it. So this is the core of what matters to you, and this is what we will be talking about today. So as Louise mentioned, Flexera has acquired Revulytics just about 2 weeks ago, and we are obviously excited about that acquisition and the combined value of monetization and usage analytics. So the two things that we are adding to Flexera's monetization platform are really usage intelligence and compliance intelligence, which both are just different views on product usage and usage analytics. And we will talk more about that today. That all delivers on the purpose of having a full customer and product lifecycle view when we talk about monetization. When we talk about monetization, it's not just billing and getting an invoice out to customers, but there's a lot that needs to happen, right? With software licensing, obviously, at the start of that life cycle, making sure that the right measures are in place, that only those customers that are entitled to use your software can use it, software delivery, getting software out to customers. And then the important part is, as software is out in the field being used, we want to think about a lot about, how are customers using the product? What are the killer features that are really important to people? What are the things that maybe are not used anymore? And then how much is being used? And is there any overuse out there that you should be aware of? Don't want to spend too much time on that, but the good thing and the exciting thing about combined software monetization and usage analytics is that you have this whole life cycle that you see here, that you can support, all based on knowing what your customers are entitled to use, what their use rights are, and then being able to analyze what is really happening out there, and then to hold these two things against each other and making better business decisions. With that, I would like to hand it over to Mark Thomason to provide his view and the market view on the usage analytics.
Hey, Nicole, thank you very much. Hi, I'm Mark Thomason. So at IDC, I cover digital business models and monetization. Oops, I want to slide ahead here. And what that means is I look at the big changes that are going on in the marketplace around tech and digital, and seeing how those are affecting business models. And then I look at it from a technology perspective of how these business models will affect the underlying technology. So in my realm, I take care of monetization technologies that are typically between CRM and ERP systems. And that includes things like subscription management, usage intelligence that we're going to be talking about today, price management, price optimization, and entitlement. So a few of these things are really in target for what I cover. So my tagline at the bottom is tracking the technologies and best practices that you need to monetize the digital technology. So with that, once a year, IDC gets together, a bunch of us analysts, and we create these documents called Futurescapes, and they have 10 predictions in there. And here's 3 of them that are in the latest version that was out in October of last year. And the first one's by 2021, over 50% of software revenue is going to come from the subscription and consumption business model. And the next couple slides, we're going to drill into that. So I'll hold the detail here, and we'll go to the next one. Is by 2022, 50% of software solution vendors will use anonymized data collected within their platforms to provide insights and benchmarks. I'm actually writing a paper right now that summarizes what some of these companies are doing out in the wild, and basically using the data that they have, the anonymized data about their customer behavior, on how they can either make benchmarks on knowing how the industry is moving ahead, because they have a lot of customers in a single industry, so they can basically quantify how an industry is doing around the use case that they solve. So you can do some really cool stuff with that data, and it's not all about monetization, but it's walking up to monetization. It's understanding the value of that data, which could take a couple of years for you to do that and understand that data. The last one is 2023. 25% of organizations will leverage data from IoT devices. And this is kind of a cool thing, because now you've got a bunch of really small, inexpensive robots out there that can monitor when something happens and how something happens. So you can understand the delivery. The simple use case is the delivery of something. You can stick a tracker in a container and watch it as it crosses the ocean, and you can monitor the humidity and the temperature within that container, so you know if that container was dropped or any kind of thing. So you know when that container got to its destination. And you don't have to have somebody with a clipboard, summarizing this, typing it into something, and then getting it back to somebody. It's like automatic. So what can you do with that data on an automated basis? That's what's going to happen to business models. It'll drive those automated things that you couldn't do before because you just didn't have enough people to monitor things that were out in the wild. So back to the software part. So the trend number one is the subscription model. It's been growing pretty quickly over the past few years, and a lot of it is one of IDC's crown jewels is its tracker system. So we have a grand tracker database that we cover a lot of technology companies, how much they make. So once a quarter, we go out and survey all these companies on how much they make in different markets so we can kind of like track this and forecast it forward. And we ask other questions like, where's the money coming from? Where's the revenue coming from? And what platform it's coming from? So we understand the difference between on-premise and multi-tenant SaaS. And so when I look into this database and I can see further down than what customers can buy, I can see a lot more detail, and I can see that on the outside, if you're moving to a SaaS platform, SaaS is almost like saying that's subscriptions. And same with PaaS and same as infrastructure as a service. All these as a service variants from the software world are all subscription-based, subscription consumption-based. So what I do with that data is I look at it on aggregate, and you can see that the market is growing at 8.2%. And then look over to the left. Boy, this is small. And you can see that license is actually shrinking at 2.8%. And maintenance is basically flat. It's 2.1%, and it's that way because the people that have on-premise products really have to have on-premise products at that point in time. So they're keeping their maintenance and moving forward. But the bulk of that is going to the subscription model. So subscription's not just the as a service. There's a bunch of companies in the next box down that says example software companies selling on-premise maintenance as a subscription. So over the last, 7-8 years, there's been an increasing number of revenue moving over from the license and maintenance type of business model over to subscription. And, I've got a few of those companies listed. Microsoft is in Bolden because last year they started and they continue to be aggressive in the next few years of converting a lot of their Office customers over to Office 365 customers. So they'll be moving the needle a lot more over from on-premise licensing to subscription. And so what that means is by 2021, we forecast to see that that's the year over 50% of revenue is going to come from the subscription business model. So a lot of people might think, wow, we've been doing the SaaS thing for a really long time. I would have thought we were past that. Well, we're not. We still got a long way to go. We still got 50% more, and that's after 2021. So the line is long. There's a lot of reasons for why some companies have moved quicker than others. And that's what the next slide is we're going to drill down into the slides now. So if we look at just SaaS, we can see that, 40% by 2023, 46% of software revenue will come from SaaS business models. So here we're not looking at those companies anymore that are selling on-prem as subscription. We're just looking at the difference between multi-tenant SaaS, which is in blue, and all the others, which is in tan on the bottom. And you can see the bold is 2023 numbers forecast. And the bottom bullet is one of the most important things of this takeaway here is 42% of the software publishers offer both public cloud and on-prem software. So almost half of all publishers that we track, in this cohort, are doing both. So they have two lines of business basically to take care of, the on-prem side and the SaaS side. When we break it down by what we call secondary markets, so we've got a taxonomy at IDC, and we break things down into primary markets, then the secondary markets, and then the functional markets. We got like 85 functional markets. And so if we look at just the application primary market, which are application stuff you buy for your business, and then look at those, we've got a group of 7 here. And I've ordered them all in how much they've been what I call SaaSified. How much the revenue has moved from multi-tenant SaaS, which is in blue again, from the on-premise model. And you can see on the left, we've got collaborative applications. These are things like email, Slack, and Office 365 and Gmail Suite and stuff like that. Those have all moved over really quick. And when you look at this transition from the left to the right, the types of markets that benefited most from collaboration, from worldwide collaboration. So you want to offer your product really needs to be able to talk to have users that are outside the company and maybe at other companies and internal to the company. So you need a lot of collaboration. So the type of and this is like one of the key benefits of having a cloud-based product. And those types of that need was greatest in collaborative applications, kind of by its name. And as you slide over to the right, there's less need for that core need for having a big collaboration type product to move to SaaS. So if you go over to engineering applications, they're starting to move. You can see the CAGR on that is 18%, that they're starting to move to SaaS. But at the end of 2023, it's only 6%. So they're just starting their move, and they're benefiting from collaboration, but they didn't have that burning desire, at the, when cloud started coming out, because they typically live in a world where the products that they work with, your CAD and CAM products, are, they keep them in a room. They keep all that data private to preserve their IP. But now you've got applications coming out that rely on external cloud-based, artificial intelligence that can up the game of some of these products and make them better and faster. So if you want those features, you typically have to be connected. But what this means is the hybrid delivery model will be in play for many years, especially for these markets on the right. So there's a long tail to this, so to speak. And then, so I've already summarized one of those bits, but the on-premise leaders have already started to move to subscription business model. And when you do that, you're basically changing the way the business runs. When you go from a transactional business to a subscription business, which is recurring, it kind of changes the way you develop, changes the way you deliver, changes the way you sell, because the incentives are different. You're selling something cheaper and longer term. And how you support it. You go from a support to a success type of model. So there's a lot of changes that have to happen when you move to these subscription business models. And so the earlier you can make that change, if SaaS is in your future or subscriptions in your future, the better. And then when you're doing that, one of the things that you want to do is if you've got a lot of on-premise customers, those are great. Those are customers that you have. Is you want to start SaaSifying your on-premise products, so you can blur the lines between your on-premise and your SaaS features and customer experience. So you welcome that customer into your other feature sets and your other products. And to do this, you want to leverage customer data to drive those decisions, lower shrinkage, and increase the revenue. So one of the fun things to say is stop guessing of how much you think somebody's going to like that or how much somebody is going to use this, and start knowing, because the nice thing about today's connected cloud-based architecture is that you can know this type of stuff. So situation overview. I mean, usage has been around for a long time. I used to work for a large on-premise company, and we had telemetry in our product that radioed back, well, not radio, but send it over the web back to us. And, this was always a thing that we wanted to spend more time in, but when it came down to the last final 3 months, we basically lower prioritized that so we could spend it on getting the quality features out. So it was something that we always wanted to do better, but it was something that didn't have high enough value for the resources that we had to get it done. So if we did it, and when we did it, we had a bunch of data, but it was locked in spreadsheets or some kind of visualization app that was low key, and it wasn't really it wasn't like what you can get today, where you can bring in other types of data and really analyze it well. But today we've got some new usage intelligence software. Well, Revialytics isn't that new, but we've got some mature usage intelligence software that is really making it a lot easier to sense all what your customers are doing, aggregate that so you can watch them, so to speak, not click by click, but just watch their journeys as they go through a product, and you can understand what they're doing. And then you can take that data and you can drive it through some analytics to understand what's noise, what's trends, when's that customer going to churn. And if you pair this data with entitlement data, then you understand, when they were entitled for it, when they upgraded, when they added seats, when they just, they upgraded, downgraded, whatever they did, you can pair that and have a better sense of knowledge. So you can take that stuff, and then we're going to go into some benefits. So one of the benefits is basically gaining product insights, kind of what we've been nibbling on. And one of the things that I like to talk about is data-driven feature success. So back in the old days, we would spend a whole lot of money and time on making products, making features, and keeping old features around because we knew we had at least one or two noisy customers that, they got to have this. And we didn't know the rest of the others that had to have that feature. So we didn't know the risk of end-of-lifing something that costs us a lot of money to drag forward. Or we didn't know when we knew when our needy customers wanted a feature and they started using it because they would tell us. But wouldn't it be great to have that data-driven perspective of have that data coming in? And you could use this to give transparency with your customers, and you could tell them what's going on, how much they actually use, so you could justify your value, from an aggregate point of view. You can find super users and testimonial candidates because from the usage, who is on, who's using these new features the most, and so you can identify those types of people. Really cool stuff. And then the most important thing from a monetization point of view is the value metrics. So really understanding out of all these features that you have, who uses them, how much, and being able to take that data. So I've got three on the left side of the equation. You can take your segmented customer demographic data, so you can know all these company names that you have in your company database, and then you can take that with the segmented customer data and know who those customers are, whether or not they're a big company, small company, industry X, industry Y. You can take that data, add it to your usage data because now you know who and what company they work for. Add that to your entitlement data, and then you can get some pretty clear understanding of what types of customers, what cohorts of customers are using these features. And then maybe what you could do is do these things above a whole lot more automated. And now Vic is going to tell us how Flexera Revialytics is going to take care of that problem.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And you see a diagram here. You may not be able to make it out, but what this is really showing you is how to visualize usage analytics. And when we talk about usage analytics, we're talking about the actual data that, as an end user, steps through the application, clicks on the features, and has their workflow. You're seeing that live data visualized in an online portal. So you as a product manager, you as a developer, or you as a marketing person trying to understand the adoption of new releases can see that data in real time. So that's a really important capability. And certainly the benefits of having direct end user feedback to drive your roadmap. And if you're a product manager, obviously you've had a lot of experience in the past having opinions, soliciting from maybe user events and trying to draw conclusions to drive a roadmap. And then once you're locked in, you're delivering capability. Imagine now if you had actual usage analytics to tell you about the platforms that are no longer supported or the features that aren't being leveraged as much, or the ones that are gaining traction, and where to put your emphasis. So that's really the usage analytics, the ability of getting that. And I think a lot of people are more familiar with that in the web context or in the mobile context, where really usage analytics and many platforms and Google and Microsoft obviously have core solutions that allow you to quickly see a page view. Now think about it in terms of an on-premise application, and there's certainly some challenges there for a web type solution to work within that context. Well, we have a platform that was purpose-built for that environment, and certainly. Some of the other capabilities we're going to step into is, once you have the usage analytics, once you understand the behavior, what can you do to act on that? And we'll talk about that in a bit. So let me step into a use case. And this is a customer, CNC Software, brand leader in their space, computer-aided manufacturing, Mastercam. This is a company that's been around for a better part of 30 years. They're on version 18 of their products, so very mature product. And as there's increasing competition, obviously, in this space, high-value software. They had over 1,200 unique features in their product. Now, this was a company that, and Mark had that same experience, where they stepped into it. They were software developers, so they came up with their own way of doing usage analytics, but found that the actual visualization of that data, the automation of what to make sense of that information was much harder. It involved a whole group of people, including their IT, and they had some real challenges with that. So they obviously looked at the different platforms out there and selected the usage intelligence solution from Flexera. And they were also pretty unaware of what features were still being used and needed to be supported in their product. They have over 200,000 manufacturers, and these are both small business as well as Fortune 100 companies. So there was a big user base that they needed to learn from, and they needed that deeper analytics. The other sort of thing that was going on behind the scenes, and the trigger certainly for additional analytics, is they had a 10-year-old user interface, and they needed to refresh that. They recognized they needed to refresh that, and they wanted to use Microsoft ribbon technology. If you're not familiar with that, when you look at an application, you see all the menus in the top in terms of tiles, and you want to present those in priority for the end user, and you certainly want those to match what the end user is actually getting the most value of. So when they looked at the actual results after implementing usage analytics into their product, and we'll look at that right now, they estimated that it cut the redesign time for the UI, now having that direct feedback, in half. And that freed up a lot of resources to place onto the effort and into the product itself versus supporting a homegrown analytics solution. They also observed how the features were being used by their community. At the beginning of the month, they would be interacting with a feature set, and at the end of a project, it would be a different feature set. And that helped them prioritize in that ribbon technology where what do they make available to the end user as a default versus having the end user customize their own user interface and figure out where these features were. And that was really important insight. They also discovered geographical trends between end users in the U.S. and Germany, for example. And this also led into their product roadmap and how they kind of look at their product moving in the future. So this is certainly a good use case and a value statement, I think, that reinforced most of the benefits that Mark talked about. Back to you, Mark.
All right. So benefit number 2, improving the customer experience. So been nibbling a little bit on this, but what you can do with this data is you can track onboarding. So when you release a new product, wouldn't it be great to basically understand how your customers are adopting these new features, and how that data could be used to understand what the opportunities for up and cross sell would be. So if customers are using feature X, or this set of features, would they like to use this other product or this other offering that you have? And would that be a really good thing to offer them instead of just offering everybody this particular product? Wouldn't it be better to offer the types of customers that really wanted it, that were really on target for using that kind of functionality? And that's what you can do with this data. You can get a lot more personalized. You can send customers renewal reports with their usage, again, to be more transparent with them, and you can let them know what value you gave them over the course of the billing cycle, to let them know that, hey, this is the value that you got out of our product. And maybe what you could do is take, if you've got a corollary to spreadsheets or some kind of manual effort, you can say, hey, using this method, it costs somebody, 13 hours, but with our product, it was only 2 minutes. So we saved you, 12 hours and 58 minutes of time. You could do that kind of accounting and show people the value of your product. You can create benchmarks of this data using cohorts of users to understand the trip points for automated messages. So if here you're understanding how long it takes somebody to do something on aggregate. What you could do is like, hey, if some people didn't make it all the way through that and they stopped before that typical time where the super users or the users that figured it out, they spent this amount of time to do it, and they spent less. Maybe they didn't understand something. Maybe you need to send them a message on how to, this YouTube video to train better, or to, get past something, or alert maybe, the success department. And so you can do this within the application nowadays, with Flexera Revialytics product, and you can pop up that in the application itself and guide them around. And so now we're going to hear how Flexera Revialytics is doing it. Nicole?
Thank you, Mark. So yeah, when it's always a question of first understanding usage, and then secondary, obviously, to act on it, right? Because I think that's the interesting part about analytics. There's always a lot that we can learn, but if you're not able to act on it, what does it all help? So it's always a combination of the two. So let's start with talking about what you need to understand from a usage perspective to really help with a better customer experience. From our perspective, there's really two angles to usage. And I always say usage means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So let's dive into that a little bit. On one hand, you'd like to understand how much software is really being used. And that is looking at what are your customers entitled to use, and then what are they actually using. There's a lot of data and insights that you get out of that view. Without even going into the real product use, you can see, okay, the customer has purchased, let's say, 100 seats. Are they using 98, which means they are probably leveraging your solution a lot, or are they just using a 15? And if they're only using a 15, why would they pay or continue to pay for the 100 when the subscription is up for renewal? Right? It is understanding if customers are getting the full value of what they paid for. And that is basically looking into entitlements and then comparing that to activations and to real use of the product, which gives you a lot of insight. And it's important to do that from a couple of different angles, right? Obviously, you might want to do that for single customers because you want to understand how successful they are, but maybe you also want to look at different groups of customers. As Mark said, build cohorts and analyze better what is this group of customers doing, or what is my group of customers doing if I'm an account manager or customer success manager. And yet then you can break it down, again, as I mentioned, to customer, and then even further down as to what products are they entitled to use, and then how much are they using, how much or how little are they using those products, right? So this is a view from a licensing perspective and an entitlement perspective to really find out if the product adoption is there. And then the other angle of usage is really looking into the product and understand how the product is being used. And that goes back to what Vic mentioned in the beginning of really understanding when end users are interacting with their product, what are they doing? What are the workflows that they go through? What are the features that they really appreciate versus what are the features that are maybe not being used that much? So that then based on that, you can make the right decisions. And with that, I think, Vic, over to you to maybe add a couple of points here and then talk about what you can do around in-app messaging.
Yeah, I think that's a real key value with the integration of the Flexera and Revialytics technology. And you can kind of see it here with the graphics. So, usage data is is, initially maybe the value was product management and development, but as you roll up and aggregate and automate how that data flows within your organization, every role is going to benefit from that live usage data. So if I'm a salesperson interacting with the CRM system, I'm about to visit the site, I want to know how things are going. I can look at the growth, the renewal, certainly the roll-up of that. I can look at the, they've adopted our latest product. It's well used within that organization. And if I'm a product manager or a developer, this lower slide shows this. This is a Sankey diagram showing the flow between events of users. And so you can start to analyze how are my users interacting with the application. Did the wizards I put in place or the menus I put in place, are they being used in the way that I expected, or have end users found a new path to value in the product? So really important that now this data can be made available to multiple roles. The other part of it is, how do you engage with this data, or really how do you act on it? And we talked about a few ways, right? One is certainly integrating into your roadmap, making that efficient. Supporting, customer support can leverage this data to know what's happening when you run into an error with our application, go into the flow and say, what are users doing to get there? These are key capabilities. But then as you start to expand the use cases for this, one of the powerful capabilities that we've added to the platform is in-app messaging. And again, in an on-premise software, kind of unique, whereas in the web context, you see this quite a bit with user engagement and training. You have this opportunity to look at the usage patterns, to design a campaign that says, okay, if the user has been running this application for a period of time, they're a power user, and they're hitting this new feature, I want to maybe have a promote to that user based on that user metrics. Hey, here's some additional value you can get from this new feature we added to the product. Or if I'm leveraging usage analytics from a trial conversion, I offer my software for free for trial, and I want to take advantage of the use of that trial user to sort of educate them to why they need to move up to a paid product. You have that capability as well. So it's really the ability to act on the data, giving you additional return on investment, obviously, and again, expanding to the roles of e-commerce, potentially marketing, or even sales. So with that, let's talk more compliance intelligence. Mark?
Hey. So, can you hear me? Okay. So more things that you can do with data. So you can create a scalable way to understand what customers are using their products in terms of the contract. Kind of talked about this a little bit in the last one. Of what are your, you bought a bunch of seats. Are they using it? Are they overusing it? Are they using pirated keys? Are they doing concurrent logins? Are they using it past the term of the contract? These are things that you wouldn't know unless you sense for stuff like this. But with products like this, you can understand these types of things. And, nobody likes the police going after them. So you can give them nice, gentle messages of, because you're detecting it early or detecting it, and you can tell them what to do, what's needed to be correct. Because a lot of users are not aware of how much usage they're using. And with that data, you could understand, if you're going back to the benchmarking, if you have that good aggregate view, you can understand what's misuse and abuse by multiple users on one account. Because the typical usage of this particular user, and when it changes a lot, maybe changes by different IPs, maybe their identity's been hacked, or they gave their login away, or somebody sold it. So with that, I want to transfer it over to Nicole. How does Flexera Analytics address that?
Yeah, I think I'll take that one, Mark.
That's yours. I'm sorry.
No,
I got ahead of myself.
Yeah, no, but I think Mark made a really good point. When we're talking, especially with the on-premise space and packaged software, And really, compliance intelligence was founded from that, from that approach of, hey, I see all this piracy activity. I see my software, my new release is available on websites. People are downloading it through peer-to-peer, and there's a visceral reaction to that, and that had driven more enforcement, more legal approaches. But I think as the industry's grown up, it's become an intelligence opportunity. I want to find out who's adopting this software. Is it purely in China? Is it educational use? And certainly you would expect that to be in there. And what we found with our customers who have deployed this technology, it's certainly eye-opening to see, as you can see in this little graphic here, this is a heat map from an actual customer implementation that shows closed-won opportunities based on compliance intelligence. And you can see where their activities are. It's in their backyard in Europe. It's in the U.S. Yeah, it's in Asia-Pacific. And many clients may either ignore the Chinese data or seek out, different partners that can act on that information, because there's certainly a challenging environment for compliance. But the key here is you're learning. You're kind of learning who's adopting the software, and the end goal of a compliance program. Yeah, sure, you're going to make money and settle more revenue based on that license leakage, but you want to gain that customer. You want that customer to be compliant and a good customer moving forward. And maybe as you're moving to your subscription model, or if you're in that transition from permanent to subscription, a way to get well is to offer a subscription plan for that company. And now that you know what they're using within the product, you know how to set what that value is. So compliance intelligence has grown out of the piracy problem that still affects companies today, anyone that has distributed applications, popular applications, even high-value applications. But it's, we see more of our customers starting to explore overuse scenarios in different ways, geographic distribution of licenses that may not have been entitled to, and all use, trying to, now that you have this configured and you can separate what is, a licensed and unlicensed customer, let's look at what's happening no matter what the use case is, so we can learn from that and combine it with usage intelligence data. Now, certainly one of the things that we found with compliance intelligence, which is this use case for usage data, is, a smaller company or mid-sized company may have no experience with compliance. And there is a bit of a, you can hand this data off to a salesperson, but we found that there's actually a specialized expertise for acting on this data. And so Flexera does have a partner network and a services team that can help provide best practices to clients to step them into it, even act on their behalf and go after that data. And I think that's important to take advantage and get that ROI of the usage out of this usage scenario, other than just quantifying it. Now, the other aspect of the technology is we decided to build our application on the Salesforce development platform, Force.com, and we did that because the ultimate goal was to generate leads or compliance cases. It's a secure platform that can be assigned to the customer and eventually integrated into their CRM system, no matter what system they use. They didn't have to use Salesforce. There's enough extensions in there to support any use case. But certainly compliance intelligence is a valuable implementation of usage intelligence, because it also can help justify the investment through the actual ROI. So I believe we're going to talk about monetization and business model innovation, Mark.
My favorite topic. All right. So in my previous history, I used to be a product manager. So all this product, this usage intelligence is like speaks to my past, because it was always something that I wanted a whole lot more richer information about, because of the feeling of I want to do things that really help people, and I want to implement things that really change somebody's situation. And with usage intelligence, it gives me a good it gives me an aggregate view that I can't go interview somebody by. But in my day job today with IDC, I'm looking at monetization. So one of the things that you can do with this data is you can, instead of guessing which companies or which sizes of companies might use, a given feature in the lowest tier, the middle tier, the highest tier, if you're doing tiers, or different bundles. Now you have data that can help you understand that. So if you've got a tier that's focused on enterprise, make sure that now we can make sure that those features are actually well in there, and the companies that are using these features are all the ones that are in your target audience that are supposed to be paying more for this, this enhanced product. And then likewise, you can decontent a cheaper product because you can know that certain types of people aren't using it, and that might save you time on keeping that edition going. And you can use this data for understanding the value. We went back to value metrics at the beginning, but now you can use this to understand the value that you give somebody, either from a time perspective or a savings or whatever your application does for somebody, and then use that data for the pricing of renewal, because you can justify how much you did for your given set of customers that you take care of at a company. And again, you can use that data that we collected earlier to drive up and cross-sell recommendations, because now we have a clearer understanding of it. And then understand that usage to understand when customers might churn. So when they stop using something or when they start using something more, you can understand if they stopped using it and they lost interest, that might be somebody who's lost interest in your product. Or it might be somebody on vacation for a month. You don't know. But again, with data, you can have a good point of view. And if you're the type that are looking for enabling your product for consumption pricing, well, then this is a great point of view here. There's new, basically there's new technologies available to software developers for creating IoT solutions or artificial intelligence or machine learning. These are inferencing functions that you can go get from other vendors, and you can use them in your application. So you're basically buying, you're buying this capability, which is typically charged on a subscription or maybe a consumption or per use basis. Every time you make that API call, it costs you money. So if you've got a variable cost in your product, that when you do a certain function, it's going to cost you money because you're using other people's technology, well, then you'd want to understand that and who's using it and be able to do feature level consumption pricing and know who it's going to be directed for. And consumption pricing is one of these things where a lot of people want until they get it. So, they only want to pay for what they use, but when they get a really lumpy bill of, really high up one month and really low the next, they don't like that unpredictability. And neither does a software developer. They don't want lumpy revenue. So that comes, with understanding the usage of something. You can make the, how much you're going to package in for consumption and within your tiers or your bundles. And then outside of that, you can charge your super users that use a whole lot more than others a consumption fee over and above, because they're the outliers. And on the consumption, we know that people are interested in it because we're asking them in surveys. And this is like one of the surveys that we did last year that was specifically around subscription management companies. So we were asking, if you're using a subscription business model, which one of these statements apply to your use of consumption pricing? And the top one was, we need help setting the right amount of consumption pricing because they just don't know. And with a product that tracks usage, you get a clue. And there's other features, there's other responses down here that call to action other things. But the most important was the top one of understanding how much you're doing so you can set the right amount of pricing. And with that, now I can pass it over to Nicole. Right?
That's right. That's right. Thanks, Mark. And we'll talk about another use case here. So this is a customer that we are working with for a long time already, and it's a real cool IoT use case. So they build scanners and X-ray machines and cameras that are all really being used for the inspection of shipping containers at shipping ports. If you're living in a port city, like I do, I live in Hamburg, and you know that we have these big ports, and there's not a lot of people working there. Everything is being done by machines, and the devices of this customer, with obviously all the software on it, are being used to inspect containers at ports. So their customers obviously are governments, right? And they have a really interesting business model where, to Mark's point before, they are not able to built a usage-based model where technically every month the customer would pay for what they really use. Because as you can imagine, with government as a customer, you cannot get away with lumpy bills that are higher and lower, changing each month. But their usage-based model really includes understanding exactly how much is being used. And as you can see here, they have a subscription and they count exactly what is being processed, right? So they look at the number of users, they look at the number of containers, they are counting high-risk containers and other things. And then when they renegotiate their contracts every 3 years and the new subscription is coming up for renewal, then the discussion here can really happen based on actual usage. So I think an interesting story, because while usage is not the only, let's say, metric that's being used for billing, it is really being used to give insight and transparency on what value the customer is receiving from that solution. And that is something that we are seeing quite often in the market. As Mark said, there are different approaches to bring in usage into the billing or into the value cycle here, just because given by the market you're operating in, or given your customers, you might not be able or you might not want to go for a full usage-based model. But when you have that information, then obviously you can have a totally different conversation with your customers, because they now know what they are actually using and what value that they get. Which should make it a lot easier to renew a subscription, or maybe if a lot is being used, even for increased price, because that discussion is, again, happening based on real facts and insight rather than on just guesswork or assumptions. So I think really interesting use case here, and something that we are seeing quite a lot in the market. And with that, back over to you, Mark, to summarize what we talked about today.
All right. So we're down to the final slide here. So essential guidance, if you're not using usage intelligence, start doing it now, because the sooner that you put it into place, the sooner you can collect data, and the sooner you can get better, more fuller picture, because you got more time collecting data. So you can't get those perspectives until you start tracking it. Find and analyze usage value metrics, very important. And then, the product usage should be part of your comprehensive business intelligence plan. It should be another feed into how your customers are doing if you've got one of those customer 360 portals that you're making. And that's a quick summary. But over to you, Louise.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mark. We have got time just briefly for a couple of questions here. So I'm just scrolling through what's come in. Vic, I've got a question for you here. So it says, how do customers combine licensing and compliance intelligence?
Yeah, good question. And licensing data certainly is key and can be a way to augment usage intelligence, because obviously licensing information does map back to a customer. And so by having an understanding of what licenses have been issued to which customers and combining it with usage, you kind of get that full mapping to the actual account that you might have a relationship with. And there's some use cases certainly that helps with compliance. So you can think of scenarios where, hey, has this particular organization that might be identified in a compliance intelligence solution, for example, have they had licenses issued in the past, even if it's not an active customer? That would certainly gauge how you approach that client. Have they evaluated the product and suddenly gone dark? You mean they were using it, there was a sales engagement, but they never converted. That would certainly be another way of combining the data. Or, is this an organization that has, when you go back and you look at the usage data, hey, they have hundreds of licenses. Why are we seeing some piracy here? And it's only for one machine. You may still approach that client, but you might approach them from a security perspective and say, hey, there's an issue here. I think you want to be aware of it, versus focusing on, hey, let's convert that one machine to revenue. So certainly other use cases there, but it's a powerful combination when you have both those together.
Great, thank you. And I'm just moving on quickly. Another question, if it's for you again, Vic. So somebody's saying here, we're not tracking usage for our on-prem products today. How much effort is it to implement a solution like yours?
Oh, okay. So that obviously this is a great opportunity. If you haven't had telemetry and actual use data
integrated into your systems, this is a great opportunity to realize ROI. In our best practices, it's easy, certainly, to implement the technology within the software to gather data. Our best practices would be start with something simple and really to help build the ROI and expand the use case for doing usage intelligence. And even in the default mode with usage intelligence, you're going to be able to see version adoption out of the application, geographic adoption, churn rates. When you look at who's actually active with the product and when do they drop off from using the product. Other software dependencies based on platforms and OS and resolutions. So those come for free with usage intelligence with very little integration. And then as you step into it and you become more aware of its capabilities, you can start to instrument features and start tracking features in your applications to start understanding user flow. And then obviously the ultimate would be to then act on that through in-app messaging, which may involve other roles. The technology is certainly easy to implement, but you have to involve other people and roles to kind of come up with the campaigns and how you want to leverage that.
Great, thank you, Vic. We're coming up on the hour, so just to be respectful of your time, I think we'll end it here. So thank you to Mark, Vic and Nicole. Thank you to all attendees for your time. Just to remind you, you will get a copy of the recording within the next 1 to 2 days. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can contact us using the emails on the screen, and we've also included a couple of links there which we think you'll find really interesting. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time today.